Welcome back everyone to this season 14 episode 16 of the Ubuntu podcast. This week we are going to be having a little bit of a retrospective on our one button challenge from FOSS Talk Live. And this week I am joined by Mark.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm just about hanging in there. My internet connection is hanging on by a thread.
Is this the heat by any chance?
I think so. I think my laptop is not enjoying the current temperatures.
And Alan, how are you doing in the heat today?
I'm relaxed because I am not writing any more Blitz Max code.
We'll get to that
More about that later.
And of course, we can't do a retrospective on our challenge without our good friend Stuart Langridge joining us. So hello again, Stuart. How are you?
Hello. I'm actually not as hot as all of you seem to be.
So, what have you been doing to avoid the heat then?
Owning an air conditioner. But the thing that I've actually been doing is I get to go to the pub now, which is nice. Hooray.
Wow.
Which is a lovely thing in itself. But the other thing I've been doing is exchanging tweets with Tim Harford from BBC More or Less, teaching him how to use Avray, which is a Discord bot for playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Huh. Hey, you're hobnobbing with all the tech celebrities you are, aren't you?
I know. Lifestyles of the rich and infamous. That's me.
What's this Avray? You play RPGs with this or D&D stuff with it?
So it's a Discord bot, but it's not for playing games like D&D. It's more sort of a helper. So it can do things like roll dice for you, which obviously you need if you're remote, because you don't necessarily want to trust that people have rolled dice correctly. You want to be able to do rolls in public and so on.
Right.
But it also knows quite a lot about rules, so it can handle a bunch of the bookkeeping and mechanics around combat and stuff like that, and things like your inventory and how spells work and all this kind of thing. So it's pretty cool, but it can be pretty complicated. It's a big Python thing, and you can write scripts for it, which start off looking quite small, and in the final analysis can be anything up to full-on Python programs that it's running on your behalf to work stuff out. So you can get pretty far into the weeds with it, which people don't necessarily have to do, but it's still confusing just to get going with. And so he asked Tim Harford, asked for help, and I went, maybe try this.
Do you think this is going to feature in a BBC podcast he does of some kind, or?
I had no idea he was another D&D player, but, I was sitting there through the conversation thinking, now say, wow, Stuart, you're now my good friend. Come and play D&D with me and the other BBC celebrities. But tragically, that didn't happen. I was very disappointed.
Mark, have you been playing games with roguelike elements with BBC celebrities?
I have not. I've been playing games all by myself, as is my preferred option. I've been playing Subnautica Below Zero.
Is this an extension to an existing game?
It's a sequel to an existing game.
Right.
So I spoke a while ago about playing Subnautica. Well, the reason I became aware of Subnautica when I did was because the sequel had just been was just about to come out of early access, and Below Zero is that sequel. So it's set on the same planet with the same premise that it's a open world survival game where all the stuff you need to gather to survive is underwater, but it's a bit of a different setting, a bit of a different storyline, and in fact more of a storyline. You're not just an anonymous character, you're actually a person with a voice who's there for a purpose. But yeah, other than that, it's kind of more of the same, but different, a bit of a different pace as well, and I'm quite enjoying it so far. The other thing that's interesting is I actually watched, after I completed Subnautica, I actually watched a speed run of it, because a big part of the game is that you don't know what you've got to do or where you've got to go, and you've got to sort of bootstrap yourself to be able to explore further, and that takes a long time. But I was really interested to see if you knew exactly what you had to do, how quickly could you do it? And there's a few interesting little hacks around, you don't necessarily need to get all the equipment that you get when you're really doing a playthrough. You can do some other things, which it turns out in the sequel, they've made it harder to do those things, which I thought was quite interesting.
Excellent.
Very good. Right. Well, with that, let's move on. So we are together again, hot off the back of FOSS Talk Live 2021. which took place on June the 12th. So I suppose I should ask the three of you, how did you find the event as viewers and participators?
I tell you what, I've really loved being part of an event again. It's been so long, but actually doing something with a significant number of people involved and feeling that sense of being part of something was wonderful.
It was very different from the in-person version, because in the in-person version, there's a lot more moving around and speaking to different people, actually speaking face-to-face with them, which obviously we couldn't do this year, and an awful lot more beer consumed. I only had a couple of beers here because, like, when you're at home, don't necessarily get absolutely spanned. But when you go to the Harrison, it's de rigueur to have quite a lot of beer, isn't it, Mark?
What? I assure you, I only drink 2.
Buckets.
That's the problem.
What about you, Stuart?
Yeah, it was about as good as you can do a virtual event, I think. I've attended a few virtual conferences over the last 18 months or so. And the worst ones are basically like a Zoom call.
Right.
And it just feels sad. And, not wishing to kiss up too hard here, but I think a large part of why that happened with FOSS Talk Live was because of all the work that Martin and Marius put into things like transitions and making everything feel quite slick. That felt really good in a way that a whole bunch of others, which is basically join this Zoom call and then answer questions from the audience, aren't like. So, yeah, it's not the same as being in the pub with people you like and having a beer and everything. But equally, it was quite a lot easier.
I think there's a lot of conferences that don't get it right. And I would not have a problem comparing the experience that we had with GitHub, some of their stuff. They have nice, flashy intro videos. They cut to the right person at the right time. And then there's a little interstitial bit between one thing and the next. And then they cut to the next person. Now, those are all like super polished, super high quality. But I think you really did a good job. And you should be proud of the work you did, Martin.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I think Marius and I have both walked away from the event with, a spring in our step. I think we are happy with how it went. So do you have any observations for how we might improve it next time? Because we did have a little bit of a chat about maybe live streaming a live show at a future date.
Well, I think one way we should improve it next time is by doing it in a pub in London. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear people's thoughts about, is it worth video live streaming the event? Because much as, yes, Martin, you did a whole bunch of work and that was very cool and everything, there's a big difference between everyone who's joining already doing so remotely by video and attempting to rig up an outside broadcast unit in the basement of a pub. I mean, the BBC struggle with this and they've got quite a lot more budget than us.
Plus, the Harrison is not an ideal venue for live streaming from. And we always thought that FOSS Talk Live was all about being, in the Harrison, in person, with friends, having beer. And that is certainly a big part of it, certainly a significant part of it. But also, everyone comes down the stairs into the basement, the tiny, tiny basement, and sits in the little rows of chairs, bunched up, getting very hot and sweaty while we do our little dog and pony show on the stage. And I think there's a lot that you miss by watching it live. Now, that said, there are people around the world who are not going to fly to London to sit in a sweaty pub with us, but they would want to watch it live. So I think there is the potential for people who will be serviced by that.
And it's worth saying that we had like 3 times the capacity of the Harrison watching live. So there definitely is a wider audience for the event.
Yeah. So we typically get 50 to 60 people in the basement of the pub when we do it live. And we peaked at 160 live views during the broadcast. And we've had over 1,000 views following the event. Wow. So we've reached more people. More people were able to involve themselves in this event than we've been able to in the past. So, Alan, can you just give us a quick recap of what our remit for our challenge was this year?
Yeah, so much like 2019, where we got together and made a something. We decided to make a something again, rather than do the usual format of the show. We did something different. And the premise for this one, we decided, was make a thing that was controlled by one button. And we didn't place too many restrictions other than that, really. It just had to be operated by a button. I think Mark came up with most of the rules around this, but it really was just create a thing with one button. And then we each made a video of our thing, and that was presented during the live stream, which you can watch on YouTube. And then we used Twitter to vote. For those who haven't seen it, that's a summary of what we did.
Yes. We will have a link to the video in this show notes for this episode. So I will recap what we made. I went first, so I made an NDI video encoder. Mark, what did you make?
I made a game. It was a single button beat matching dungeon crawling, but only crawling in one direction.
Stuart slandered all of us, I think.
I did.
What was it you made?
I made a game which is basically Snake, except with loads of really mean caricatures of everyone else involved in FOSS Talk Live.
And Alan?
I made a space survival game, which relied on a mechanic of having only one button.
Right. Okay. So, Alan, we're not going to bury the lead. You won the competition. At the end of the votes, you came out the winner. So
I was selected by the internet. Yes.
Yes. In a popular vote. So how did you come up with your game idea? What you presented, is that what you originally intended to make?
I think I had some other ideas, but there's a game that I really like called Pax Britannica, and it's underwater ships, up to 4 players, all on the same device. You can get it. It's in the Play Store, and you'll get a sense for where the mechanic comes from. There's 4 ships, and you hold down a button, or you hold down a portion of the screen in order to charge up a circular ring. And the first quadrant sends out a little ship, and then the next quadrant sends out a slightly bigger ship, and then the third one does a really big ship, and then the fourth quadrant makes the charge go faster. So I basically copied that mechanic of the charge wheel. And initially I did consider making it multiplayer and do it basically re-implementing Pax Britannica, but in space. But, I didn't have the skills, I think. And the network bandwidth wouldn't have been good. So I decided to just do a single player, survive in space. And the wheel was a charge wheel.
Okay. And in recent episodes, you've talked about Blitz Max, which is a programming language from the past, the very distant past. How did you arrive at that as the language you were going to use for this?
I actually tried using Construct 3. I've played with Construct 3 before, which makes HTML5 games. And I had a play with that, and I did get it working. And I made a prototype that I could hold down a button and it would count up while I held the button down, and then I let go, and I could do the mechanic that I needed of pressing and holding and letting go, which is like really basic, but I just needed to prove that worked. But after a break, I gave up on Construct, and I decided I could probably make this faster in a proper programming language. And the only one I really know well, having made games like 20 years ago or whatever, was Blitz. And so I dug out the download and then found that there's a Discord community and there are people who still use it.
Was your download on floppy disk?
No, it turns out since I last used it, Blitz has been open sourced and it's on GitHub and people contribute to it. Oh, wow. And there's a new release called Blitz Max NG, which adds some features. And there are people who develop additional add-on modules to do all kinds of like maths and graphics modules and all kinds of stuff. But I didn't use any of that. I just used the basic feature set that Blitz has. But the thing I really like about it is it's open source and it builds to a single binary, and it works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So if I wanted to, I could do Windows builds and Mac builds, but I only did a Linux build. But that's because I knew it was familiar and I could crank the code out pretty quick, and just press F5 and it would build every time, and I'd get a binary, and it's very fast iterating cycle with Blitz.
Fabulous. So Mark, why did you choose JavaScript?
So I had the idea to make a beat matching game, and I had no idea how to do that. So I started off looking at, an engine for making a game, and I started looking at that, and then I started trying to learn how to use the engine that I was looking at, and I thought, I don't have time to learn an engine. I need to learn how to do beat matching. Otherwise, I'm not going to get anywhere.
What engine were you looking at?
I was looking at Godot.
Ah.
You might hear more about that on a future podcast. So I thought, well, with JavaScript, I know how to handle events, and I know that you can play audio in a web browser, so I must be able to work out how to sync those up in the time available to me. So basically that's what I went with, and it worked.
I was really impressed with the beat matching bit, because as you were explaining that, my mind was spinning a bit about how that whole thing works.
Yeah. So basically there's a library called Tone.js, which lets you sequence audio, and you give it the number of beats per minute, and you tell it how long each note is going to play for. And then you can sequence either like synthesized notes, or I used some drum samples that I got off of archive.org. And then there's a bit of maths going on, so it'll when it's going to play the drum sound, which is the beat, it will. It's a bit complicated because it's hard to be super accurate, so you've got to let people have a bit of fuzz around the actual sound. So it fires an event to say the beat is now, and then it waits a tiny amount of time, and then it plays the beat for an amount of time, and then it waits that tiny amount of time again, and then it says the beat's finished. So if you press the button in between when it says the beat is now and the beat's finished, then it says okay, and you move along the level. But you've also got to take into account that the faster the beat of the track is, the more threshold relative to that amount of time it's actually playing you need in order to allow people to hit it with some reasonable chance.
Right. That's nifty. I liked Stuart's comment as you were presenting that, as like for a future improvement, instead of moving sideways, you moved forwards in sort of 3D as your trajectory.
I wasn't working out how to do 3D graphics at the same time as all of this.
It sounds like you're suggesting that he re-implements Guitar Hero, basically.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, well, effectively. Or maybe, something like Sonic 3D, but with one button.
Yeah, it's a nice idea. I'd certainly give it some thought.
So, Stuart, when did you decide you were going to take the mick out of the three of us?
Well, that wasn't my original plan.
Oh.
I had a completely different plan. So we originally, Mark, I believe, originally suggested the thing on February the 27th. This is the thing about the single button and so on. And so I went away relatively soon after that and prototyped the idea that I'd had, which I was quite pleased with. And then so I'd written about 2/3 of it, and then I needed to come back to it. And then you lot all went, hey, what we should do is we should all record videos of our plans, of our games, and then talk over them in the thing. And I thought, but I can't do a video of mine, because what I was going to do was a collaborative game. So the idea was you'd have a spaceship or whatever, and then I'd give everyone watching a URL, and they'd all get a mobile phone app or a desktop, a web app, whatever, with one big button on it, because it's one button. But they'd have different buttons. So half the audience would get a left button and half the audience would get a right button. And then the game would be, okay, here's your spaceship, and then here, just directly in front of it on the other side of the screen, is the target. Can you, shower of morons, make the thing go forward, or is it just going to spiral off or whatever? And then there'd be increasingly complicated levels or whatever. And I had most of that built. And I thought, it's a bit of a subversion of the one button concept, because you'd all go, but there's loads of buttons. I was like, each individual person only has one button. I had all the network stuff worked out and everything. But obviously this doesn't work on video because it needs to be live. And part of the reason I was doing it was because of the surprise reaction I'd get from the three of you when I said, okay, everyone go to here, which means that when you said video, I couldn't go, no, I don't want video, because if I told you why, then you wouldn't be surprised. So I'm like, okay, so I've got to come up with a whole new idea with like a month to go, which was a bit sad. But I was quite pleased with the way the thing I did turned out. it was basically an excuse to mock you all, but I like, I mean, you know, maybe it's wrong of me, but I like jokes that make me laugh the whole time I'm implementing them.
So I'll just add, I didn't endorse the video idea for obvious reasons, because I couldn't really easily make a video either. So I just ignored that. That request.
Oh, you didn't do a video, did you? You did a presentation.
No, I did slides. Yeah.
You did live slides. Well, I suppose it's helpful when you're the person running the master OBS thing to be able to just plug LibreOffice into it.
So, Martin, you actually spoke a bit on the show about part of your thing, which was taking a NUC out of its casing and putting it in a silent case. When you were telling us about that, was this idea of this device you made already in motion, or were you making something else at the time?
When I spoke about what I was doing to the NUC on the podcast, I was doing this idea. But like Stuart, on February the 28th, I planned and designed a whole different thing, which I didn't actually create. But what I planned was a Raspberry Pi based digital camera where you turn it on with a button, and then every operation to change between photo and video mode, starting taking videos, stopping taking videos, and taking pictures is all done through multiple button presses to, you know, action it, and then a long press to shut the thing down. And I have all the parts in a box next to me now, but I realized by the time sort of March and April came round, I was like, there is lots of things I don't know how to implement in this, and from a software point of view, this might be a bit more challenging. And I genuinely needed what I made. And I thought, aha, I can make this a one-button thing, and this I can make much more quickly.
It's interesting how the controversy kicked off in the chat when people saw, you know, saw what we made and were like querying, oh, how many buttons are that? And how do you do that? And how do you operate this thing? Mostly around my game, to be fair.
Yes, I think you're referring to Escape Gate.
Yes, and Pause Gate and Menu Gate. The multiple different. So the thing that I didn't quite get, why people didn't understand the way the menu works, because it literally, you just hold, if you hold the space bar down, the little arrow is pointing to one of the options. And as soon as you start holding the space bar down, once you hold it down for more than a certain period of time, it starts moving through the options, just cycling through them one after the other. And as soon as you let go, it stops where it is. And it's really easy to get it to stop on the target you want it, because it only moves every half a second or so.
You see, I don't think so. A while back, Martin and Alan, you did 8-bit Versus, right? Uh-huh. And you played some kind of a game from Alan's childhood, which was like Daley Thompson's Decathlon or something. And there was a sub game in this of archery. Yes. Where you had to fire an arrow by holding down the space bar or whatever. The arrow then flew across screen and hit the target in the right place. And that was a whole game, fun, basically doing the way you built the menu, which is not meant to be a challenge.
No, because the way archery works in Hypersports is...
Hypersports, yes, that was the name.
Archery, what you're holding down a button for is lifting his arm up. And there's two factors in this. Because the target is moving down the screen, it's basically moving across your field of view, and you're lifting your arm up to, like, you got to get 5, in the middle of the target. And so there's timing that needs to be thought about by the person holding down the spacebar. Whereas in mine, you just hold the spacebar down and let go when it's on the right thing. Whereas in Hypersports, you've got to hold it down and wait for it to get a certain point, but you've got to start holding down at exactly the right point when the thing comes on the screen. So there's no timing involved in mine. It was just hold the button down, let go when it's on the right thing, and then tap it to select.
Honestly, I thought wow, this is the worst possible one-button control scheme, until I heard about Martin's idea to run a whole camera by just go, I want to take a picture, press it 31 times, pausing between the second and fourth one, right? Like some kind of Morse code person in World War II. Why would anyone want to do that?
I got it figured out. And actually, the idea behind it is it was a replacement for, those disposable cameras you find at weddings. It was a replacement for that. And every time you take a picture, it sends it to Instagram and Twitter immediately. So instead of having to wait, weeks to get your 12 photos back badly out of focus, you can look at them live at the event, because you could have multiples of these and people can just take as many as they want.
You and I have very different opinions on what the word disposable means.
Right, disposable Raspberry Pi.
No, not what I'm making.
Yeah, but the whole point of a disposable camera is that it costs like 50p. A thing with a Raspberry Pi and an actual camera that can talk to Wi-Fi is not going to cost this.
This was part of my challenge, right? Those disposable cameras cost 15 quid. And they only store 12 or 24 photos.
No way are they that expensive. They're like 50p a piece, otherwise no one would buy them.
Unfortunately, they're quite pricey, between sort of £9 and £15 each for 12 and 24 photographs.
What? That's okay. That's absolutely outrageous. And people who sell disposable cameras, you should be ashamed of yourself. Now I feel like you could actually buy a Raspberry Pi and a camera module for less.
Meanwhile, back on topic.
Sorry.
So I think it was a success. I think our segment went down quite well, and we did all manage to create something. It doesn't matter who won. It was the taking part and the creative challenge, I think, that was more important.
How very magnanimous of you, winner.
Thank you for recognising that. I wanted to ask, if we're going to do a FOSS Talk Live again, either in person or virtual, would you do another one of these creative challenges? And would you do another one that had limitations like this?
This is the third time we've done a constrained challenge, and I really enjoy them. So yes, I would want to do something like this again and make it our shtick for these live shows.
Yeah, I agree. I've enjoyed all the ones I've done so far. As long as we can come up with a suitably ridiculous constraint each time. I think our game in Bash was quite a high bar. So if we can come up with something that good again, I'd definitely be up for doing another one.
Maybe we can crowdsource some crazy ideas.
Yeah, I mean there are certainly game jams that do this. I know you've done these limited game jam. You did the mobile phone game jam, didn't you, Stuart?
Yeah, I've done a couple of them. There's one, so there was the Nokia 3310 one, and there's the low res jam where you have to make a game which is 64 pixels by 64 pixels. I've done that. That's now run. It's run 3 or 4 times, I think, but I've entered it twice.
Yeah, I really like the idea of being constrained in developing something, because it really makes you think. I don't know how I would manage to make anything legible in 64 by 64 pixels, but there's other ones, like there's one running at the moment which is write a program in 10 lines of BASIC, 8-bit BASIC, and it have to be 72 characters long. And I think that really sparks more creativity. And I think that's the reason why I like doing this, is it's not just reading out news or reading out, commenting on community news and stuff like that. It's actually creating a thing. And I think that's why I really like it.
I think the other thing that the restrictions lend themselves to is it does help time box how much effort we put into them, because if we do constrain things significantly, there's only so much you can actually do with those constraints.
And you can largely get away with it being a joke is not the right way of putting it, because these are serious and good, cool things that everyone built, but it gives you the freedom to say, okay, I don't need to build a whole complete useful thing. Here's an idea. This is the same principle that game jams are all about. The whole idea is that you'll do something which is cool, and then if you like it, maybe you carry on afterwards. And a whole bunch of popular games started off in game jams, but the whole reason they're constrained to 48 hours is so you don't have to. You're allowed to. You're given permission to leave a bunch of stuff out just to play with the core idea. And I don't know about all of you, but I probably put that much-ish work into it, just instead of it all being done in one weekend. It was done in an odd hour, grabbed here and there over the course of the 2 months leading up to it or whatever. But it felt like a game jam to me.
Yeah, if I didn't have family and I didn't have commitments like making food and getting them out of bed and taking them to football training and stuff like that, I would love to regress back to being a teenager, get pizza delivered, sit in my pants and just code for a whole weekend and not care about anyone else on the planet and just, sleep when I need to, when I'm tired at 4:00 in the morning. And then as soon as I wake up, carry on coding. That kind of thing, it kind of appeals to me. But I have responsibilities as a grown up that makes that slightly hard. But now they're teenagers and they can, sort themselves out. Maybe I might enter a game jam again.
So there it is. Those were our 4 things that we made. We all had fun doing it. So my question to the listeners is this. If you were to make a thing operated by one single button, what was it? Let us know your ideas. It'll be interesting to hear what you can come up with. And also preempting a possible future event. If we had to come up with a constrained challenge in the future, what are your ideas for something we create with constraints and restrictions? So send your ideas to show@ubuntupodcast.org. And that's all for episode 16. Thanks very much for Stuart to join us and have a little retrospective on our time at FOSS Talk Live.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm always happy to come and help out other podcasts,
I think we may be reprising Ubuntu Voltage at some future date.
I like the rebranding. I have to say, I'm fully in favour of this as a concept.
Anyway, that's it. If you want to get in touch between shows, you can join our Telegram channel at ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram. Send us your wonderful feedback at show@ubuntupodcast.org. And if you are in the market for a fine VPS, then take yourself over to bitfolk.com.